what I've been told is that the main source, the main lifeblood for connection, the main thing for connecting us was the waterways, was the ocean, was the different straits. And so each bay, each inlet, each point of the island had its own name, and each name was tied to a different family, a different house, a different community. And even places like Galiano didn't traditionally have one name for the whole island. It was the waterways that had whole names, and then each spot on the island was given to different families or under their rights and responsibilities for care and use of that area. And they were through the names, and how the names are attached to people's names was how you understood the place. And so the whole island was accessed through our canoes. And you don't park your canoe here, travel up the island to the other end, get on another canoe and come back to your canoe. Your canoe is your route, it is your connection, it is your thing. And so this idea of one continuous part of the island and having one name for that whole strip, just, it didn't make sense. It wasn't necessary, it wasn't necessarily helpful. But growing up, the water was a barrier, right? And traditionally that wasn't the way it should be. The water should be the connection. The water should be the thing that allows us to travel to the various sites, because I can acknowledge that when we say we claim it, we don't have full claim to every square inch of the island. That is a colonial way of thinking, that is not the traditional way of thinking. You don't throw a blanket over everything and say that that's yours. You have different rights and responsibilities in different places. It's part of the seasonal round. And that seasonal round overlaps, where even at different times of the year, different peoples will have connection. It's why a place like Galiano can have 37 different First Nations that have some form of claim on the island. And it gets really complicated if you only view the island as one whole thing separate from the other islands around it. I te pueli altana salelu, and Tepe Levi Wilson, and I'm a member of the Gagaat First Nations with strong family connections to the Malcha peoples of what's now known as Penellicut Island. I lived most of my life on Galiano, save for a few years when I've now gone off and done my careers elsewhere, being a teacher, and for most of my time on Galiano being a carpenter and learning to be an educator.
And my name is Emily Menzies. I met Levi here on Galiano through floor hockey, actually, and but we quickly realized that we had a common interest in changing the status quo of the understanding of folks on the island around just what makes this place so special. And it's been a real privilege to kind of work with Levi as like life and educational partners to kind of do this work together. And we're raising our daughter that is off screen but in the background there, Gladys.
We're meeting today at a place in English known as Montague Harbor that I've since come to know as Sumnu, which means the encircling place or the enclosed place or something related to that. It is what some people would call a midden. I call it a manufactured landscape. It is a site where I assume many generations of my ancestors have helped cultivate the landscape to promote growth of life, promote safety in the inner harbor, to make this place better over thousands and thousands of years. And so you can see here where the original part of the land was, and then above it has been centuries and centuries and centuries of deposits of various shells, other refuse that people call, that archaeologists in particular call midden. But it's not just a dumping ground. This wasn't, I stress a lot, this wasn't just we have all this garbage and we need somewhere to put it. It was, we have all this stuff that can help us turn this environment into something that's more practical, more powerful, more plentiful for everybody that's coming later. It's that type of mentality that shifts from what do I need to do to get rid of the stuff that I have now to how can I help all of the future generations. All the people that dumped stuff here, that created this landscape, that put these layers and layers and layers across the entirety of what's now the park, would never have benefited from what they were creating.
Yeah, Levi was mentioning that, like, if as you walk along this edge, like the big storms, right, they come in and they erode the bank, right? So that's how we can see this exposed midden or, you know, manufactured landscape. But it's like so much of the shell material has been exposed and brought down, and then it's been here for so long. Like, that's why Montague or some of those beaches are all white, right? Is because this sand is, you know, yeah, okay, there's some little bits that are little bits of rock, the dark bits, right? But the little white bits, which give it that creamy color, they are all from this bigger shell. And that shell is all, you know, coming off there. I mean, yeah, sure, seagulls harvest shellfish as well, but not compared to when you think about how many humans have been harvesting shellfish here for how long. It's just, I find it mind-boggling, like how sustainable of a food resource this whole place has been for so many people for so long.
People have been everywhere on this coast since forever ago, since time immemorial is the phrase. Time immemorial meaning time out of mind. Time beyond what we can conceive. People have been here and have shaped so many different parts of our environment around us. Things that we take for granted now are actually constructed. And when I'm working with students, one of the big things that comes up is what most people know as the Gary Oak Meadows, but which we've started calling, or at least I've started calling with my students, the camas meadows, because the point of those meadows was to grow camas bulbs, which was an important staple food for people. And a lot of my students have heard this story of how the Gary Oak ecosystems, they're getting erased. They're not persisting. They haven't heard how those ecosystems maintain themselves in the face of things like hemlock, Douglas fir, and all these other bigger trees that take over. And in reminding them that Indigenous peoples used that area for food, for propagation, for cultivation, and actively maintained those sites, which is what made them as strong and vibrant as they were, made them as widespread as they were, has been, and having that narrative of them disappearing, needing maintenance from people, and seeing that moment when people realize that the only reason those ecosystems exist are because Indigenous peoples created them and maintained them. And that idea that, yeah, it could go away if we're not careful.